It was supposed to be a nothing day. You know the kind: wet sky, cranky engine, half-warm coffee sloshing in a dented thermos. My boots were soaked through before I even got to the pump, rain slicing sideways across the lot like it was mad at me specifically. I stopped for gas at a corner station with flickering lights and a cashier who looked like she'd aged 10 years just waiting for her shift to end. I slid my debit card across the counter and added a bottle of soda and a $2 lottery ticket. One of those last-minute, why not, buys that's more ritual than hope. I tucked the ticket into my wallet behind a receipt for motor oil and forgot about it. That evening, the rain hadn't let up. Miranda was on the couch, legs tucked under her in that way she did when she wanted to look cozy but distant. She scrolled endlessly on her phone, eyes darting but never seeing me. I was reheating stew from 3 nights ago, the kind that got thicker each day like it was preparing for battle. I poured it into bowls, added crackers, didn't bother asking if she wanted cheese. She didn't look up. I set her bowl down anyway. The TV droned on in the background, some local anchor listing off the day's numbers like they mattered. I didn't even remember the ticket until the second number hit. I froze, mid-chew. Wait, that's one of mine. I reached into my wallet with fingers suddenly clumsy and fished out the ticket. The soggy edges crackled faintly as I unfolded it. My eyes darted between the screen and the ticket. 2 numbers. 3. My chest tightened. 4. Miranda noticed me staring at the screen and muttering under my breath, but said nothing. 5. I wasn't breathing anymore. My heart hammered like it was trying to warn me of something too big to understand yet. Then came the 6th number, and the world stilled. $2.5 million. My first reaction wasn't joy. It wasn't disbelief. It was silence. Utter, bone-deep silence. The kind that rearranges your bones before your mind even catches up. I didn't speak. I didn't jump. I just sat there, staring at a slip of paper that had just exploded every rule I thought governed my life. Miranda finally looked up. What is it? I shook my head. Nothing, I said too fast. Then I got up and walked to the workshop behind the house, the stew left to congeal on the table. My mind buzzed with numbers and possibilities. I didn't trust the moment. Not yet. I needed confirmation. I opened my laptop and checked the lottery site. I triple-checked the ticket. The numbers were real. The prize was real. And I needed to protect it like it was sacred. First, I called Tyrell. My brother in spirit, my college roommate. The man who once talked me out of buying a used Corvette with my student loan refund. He answered with his usual dry drawl. Yo, I think I just won the lottery. Come again. 6 numbers. I matched 6 numbers. There was a pause. You drunk? I'm holding the ticket in my hand. Ty. I'm staring at the winning numbers. He let out a long whistle. How much? 2.5 million, he said, incredulous. I could hear him moving, like he was pacing already. You serious? I'm dead serious. Come over. He was at my door in 10 minutes, still wearing his office lanyard, rain soaking through his hoodie. I opened the door and showed him the ticket without a word. He stared at it like it might bite him. This changes everything, he said. I know. We both stood in the workshop, the only place in the house that felt like mine. Tools on the wall, sawdust on the floor, my unfinished wood chair project half done in the corner. It smelled like cedar and glue and control, something I hadn't felt in a while. I grabbed a Ziploc bag from the shelf and slid the ticket inside, sealed it like it was radioactive. I pulled up 2 floorboards near the far wall, revealing a narrow cavity where I kept old designs and backup cash. I slid the bag between them and pressed the wood back in place. Smart, Tyrell said. I don't want Miranda to know. Not yet. He didn't question me. That's the thing about old friends. They don't need the whole story to back you up. They remember enough to trust your silence. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in the workshop, pillow under my head, the ticket under the floor. Rain kept falling. I listened to it tap against the tin roof, my mind racing. Not about cars or vacations or champagne dreams, but about who would find out, who would change, who would demand. It was already happening in my head. Miranda, her family, even mine. Everyone would have an idea, a need, a plan. But what about mine? At 2:43 a.m., Miranda knocked on the workshop door, then let herself in without waiting. Why are you sleeping out here? She asked, looking around like I'd become a stranger. I shrugged. Had some thinking to do. She tilted her head. Is something going on? I looked at her carefully. Her eyes were sharper than usual, calculating. I smiled. Just tired of the noise. She didn't press. Just nodded. arms crossed, then turned and left. The moment the door clicked shut, I exhaled. The game had begun. I didn't know what it would cost me yet, but I knew this. Something had shifted. Lightning didn't just strike in the sky. Sometimes it struck in your wallet, quiet, blinding, and ready to set the world on fire. I decided to tell her over dinner. I made her favorite, lemon chicken with rosemary, roasted red potatoes, and the overpriced wine she always kept in the back of the cabinet for something special. Well, this was special. Or at least, it should have been. I didn't make it elaborate, but I lit a candle, set the table properly, even used the linen napkins we'd gotten as a wedding gift from her aunt, the ones we'd never once touched since. She came in from her yoga class still in leggings and a cardigan, tossed her gym bag in the corner, and raised an eyebrow when she saw the table. "What's the occasion?" she asked, pulling her hair into a loose bun. I smiled and nodded toward her seat. "Sit. Eat. Then I'll tell you." She obliged, though the suspicious look lingered. We made it halfway through the meal with small talk. She went on about how the instructor was finally getting her sequences right, and how her sister was asking again about borrowing our car. I nodded through it all, waiting for the moment, the right pause. It came when she took her first sip of wine and sighed. I set my fork down. "I won the lottery." Her glass hovered midair. "What?" "Last Tuesday. Gas station on 7th and Mill. I bought a $2 ticket. Matched all 6. She blinked at me, then laughed. Not a joyful laugh, more like the kind you use to cover up disbelief. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. $2.5 million. She stared at me for a long time, trying to read my face, and when she didn't find any tells, her expression changed. Her face went pale, like she'd just been dropped into ice water, then flushed pink a second later, her eyes going glossy. She leaned back slowly in her chair. "You're not joking?" I shook my head. "I've already had it confirmed. It's real." "Oh my God," she whispered. Then louder, "Oh my God." I waited, giving her the space to let it sink in. She stood suddenly, came around the table, and wrapped her arms around me in a tight, almost aggressive hug. "This is huge," she murmured. "Everything changes." "I know." She stepped back, holding my face in her hands like she needed to keep me real. "Do we have to wait long? How does it work?" "There's a process. I'm going with the lump sum. After taxes, it'll be a little less, but it's already in motion." She nodded quickly, her mind already skipping ahead. Okay, so we can pay off the house. And the Subaru. We should give your parents a little, just to thank them. And my parents, of course. They raised me. I mean, they should probably get half, honestly." My smile froze. "Half?" She didn't catch my change in tone. She was pacing now, waving her wine glass, spilling little drops as she talked faster. "Marshall's been talking about needing a new truck for ages. And Mom's business, she's been running herself ragged with those retreats. That kind of stress causes real medical fatigue. They shouldn't have to work anymore." I raised a hand. "Miranda." She paused mid-sentence, her lips still parted. "What?" "I haven't even received the money yet. And there are legal steps. Taxes, protections." "Yeah, but once we do, we'll take care of them, right?" she asked, her voice shifting. "They've earned it." I exhaled slowly, choosing my words like I was navigating a minefield. "We'll take care of us first. You and me. After that, we can discuss what's reasonable." That wasn't the answer she wanted. Her mouth tightened. "You don't think helping my parents is reasonable? I think giving them half is extreme." She set her glass down a little too hard. "They did more for me than your parents ever did for you." "That's not the point," I said calmly. "This ticket was mine. I bought it. You weren't even with me. We're married," she snapped. "What's yours is mine." I stared at her, realizing just how fast we'd slid off the edge of celebration and into territory we'd never come back from. "It's not that simple." She stared back at me, eyes cold now, something distant and calculating growing behind them. "You sound like you've already made up your mind. I'm saying we need to move carefully. We don't owe anyone half a fortune." She pushed her chair back with a screech and stood. "You know what? I'm going to call my dad. He'll help me break this down. He understands financial planning." And that was the moment it shifted again. My stomach coiled. "You're going to call Marshall? About this? He's smart. He knows how these things go." "Miranda, no. This doesn't leave the room yet. We haven't even secured the funds." She narrowed her eyes. "Are you hiding something?" I stood too, not wanting to tower over her, but needing to assert myself. "I'm protecting something. There's a difference." She turned on her heel and left the room. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd felt since we'd moved into that house. I cleaned up the dishes, wrapped the leftovers, and watched the candle burn out. She didn't come back downstairs. I didn't go up. Around midnight, I walked out to the workshop. I took up the floorboards and pulled out the Ziploc. I held it for a long while under the overhead light, that little slip of paper that had become the news center of my life. I had trusted it more than I trusted her now. I couldn't sleep in the house that night. I laid down on the old couch in the workshop with a pillow under my head and the ticket under that. I left the light on, not because I was scared of someone coming for it yet, but because I needed the clarity. Needed to be fully awake in a dream I was already losing control of. Miranda and I had built years together, but the cracks were there long before this. The difference now was this wind didn't fill the gaps between us. It lit them up like lightning bolts. And in that jagged, blinding light, I was starting to see her clearly. I woke up with a stiff neck and the taste of rust in my mouth. The workshop couch had lost its spring years ago, and the air was heavy with the lingering scent of varnish and cedar dust. I sat up slowly, rubbed my face, and checked the floorboards. Still there. The Ziploc bag was untouched, its contents as thin and fragile as ever, yet powerful enough to turn a life inside out. I slipped it back beneath the boards, covered it carefully, and stood. Inside the house, the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound at first. No footsteps, no clinking mugs, just quiet, the tense, eerie kind that announces trouble before it even walks into the room. I walked to the kitchen, flicked on the kettle, and was just reaching for the coffee tin when Miranda's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "So that's where you slept." I turned. She stood in the hallway in her robe, arms crossed, eyes bloodshot like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was still tousled, but not in the soft way it used to be. It looked wild now, like the reflection of something fraying inside. I gave a short nod. "Yeah." She stepped into the kitchen slowly, deliberately. Her fingers tapped against the counter as she leaned in just slightly. "You planning to hide out there every night? With your little golden ticket?" I didn't answer. Not immediately. I poured hot water over the grounds and let the scent do its work. Some conversations need caffeine just to survive. "I'm protecting it," I said after a beat. "From everything. Including us." She snorted. "You mean from me?" I met her eyes. "You were on the phone with your father last night. I heard you." Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't deny it. "I was explaining the situation. He's better with finances." "You said, 'Don't worry, he'll come around.'" Silence. Just the hiss of the kettle now. Her shoulders tensed. "You were eavesdropping?" "I was listening to my wife make plans behind my back." She shook her head and stepped forward, placing her hands flat on the kitchen island like she wanted to plant a flag. "This isn't about you versus me. We're a team. Or did you forget that the moment your lucky numbers hit?" I took a deep breath. "Miranda, I've been thinking about this nonstop. What we do next. How to keep us safe. But you're not treating it like a shared blessing. You're treating it like a family bailout plan." She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean Marshall and Doreen. I mean the way you started spinning in your head before we even got anything in our account. You said they deserve half." "Half, Miranda. Of everything. That's not protecting our future. That's sabotage." She leaned in, voice lowering to something cold. "You think my parents don't deserve a thing for raising me? For helping us all these years? I think they helped when it was convenient, and guilt us when it wasn't. I've paid for 3 of Marshall's truck repairs and fronted your mom's retreat fees twice in the last 18 months. They've gotten enough. They're family," she snapped, her voice rising. "So are we," I said, louder now. "You and me. At least, I thought we were." She went quiet then. Too quiet. Her mouth opened, then shut again, like the words she wanted to use couldn't find footing anymore. I picked up my mug, took a long sip, and looked out the kitchen window. "I'm not saying we don't give. I'm saying we don't bleed ourselves dry for people who see us as a paycheck." That was when she said it. "We're married. It's not your decision alone." She said it like it was a verdict, like she had just thrown down a legal truth that would override anything I could possibly argue. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the shift. Not a partner, not a confidant, but someone who had already made her move and was waiting for me to fall into it. The rest of the day, I kept mostly to myself. I canceled the usual weekend plans. Tyrell texted, asking if I was good. I said, getting Messier by the hour. He didn't press. He never did. That's why I trusted him. Miranda stayed upstairs most of the day. When she did come down, it was with tight smiles and polite conversation, like we were two co-workers who had to share a break room. She cooked dinner for herself. Didn't ask if I wanted any. Around 9 p.m., I walked into the living room and caught her on the phone again. She didn't see me right away, so I waited. Her voice was soft, familiar. No, he's just being stubborn. But don't worry, he'll come around. Same words. Same exact phrase. Like a script. I stepped into the room. She jumped and clutched the phone tighter, then ended the call quickly. That was just. I heard. She didn't bother lying. She just stood there, eyes flicking past me, like maybe she was searching for sympathy that wasn't in the room. Miranda, I said, you've already made up your mind. You're not even waiting to see what happens. Her voice broke a little. I just want to make sure we're all taken care of. You want control? I corrected. You want the story written before the first check clears. She didn't deny it. And that silence said more than anything. That night, I didn't go back to the workshop. I stayed in the guest room. It felt colder somehow, like the air didn't trust me either. While she slept, if she even did, I quietly moved the real legal documents. The lottery confirmation, the fund transfer receipt, the new account details. I placed them in a sealed folder and took them with me first thing in the morning to a downtown office that bore no trace of our names together. A lawyer named Ms. Daniels met me there. Clean suit, no nonsense, exactly what I needed. She helped me set up the private trust. Quiet, clean, airlocked from the storm that was clearly brewing. We discussed legal protections, asset separation, power of attorney changes. I also gave her the original ticket. She smiled gently and locked it in her firm's safe, just in case. When I got home, Miranda didn't ask where I'd been. She was on the porch, talking to her sister on speaker, giggling about something meaningless. She glanced at me once, gave a thin-lipped smile, and turned away. But I knew. We were already on opposite sides of a line we hadn't drawn together. And the moment she told her father, he'll come around, I knew I never would. The rain had finally stopped when I pulled into the driveway, but the clouds still hung low like they hadn't quite forgiven the sky for letting go. I've been staying at Tyrell's place for 2 nights. He offered me his guest room, gave me space, and didn't ask for details beyond. It's about the ticket, isn't it? I didn't have to say much. He knew. That was the thing about Ty. He didn't need the drama narrated to know which side of the story I was standing on. Still, by the 3rd morning, I needed to face the house again. Face Miranda. I didn't expect the smoke. At first, I thought it was a fireplace gone too hot. Then I caught the smell sharp, acrid, not quite like wood. Something synthetic was burning. My stomach twisted. I parked in a rush and dashed toward the front door. It wasn't locked. That alone told me more than I wanted to know. The smoke was curling up lazily from the living room. Not thick enough to trigger the alarms, but heavy enough to sting the back of my throat. I stepped inside, heart pounding. And there she was, Miranda, standing over the fireplace, clutching what looked like charred paper and cardboard, fragments of something flat and wide. My brain didn't register it at first. She turned slowly, calm, like she had just roasted marshmallows instead of setting something on fire. "You're back," she said coolly, not a trace of panic in her voice. "What did you do?" My voice was lower than I intended, more breath than sound. She held up the last remnant of the ceremonial lottery check, just the corner with the logo still barely legible, curling in the heat before it crumbled. "If you won't share," she said flatly, "then you won't get a penny." The world slowed. My eyes flicked from the flames, now dying out in the grate, to her face, so still, so composed it chilled me more than the act itself. She really thought she had done something. She really believed she had taken control. And then, I laughed. I don't even know where it came from, but it erupted out of me, loud and deep and sharp around the edges. A full, chest-heaving, ridiculous laugh that echoed through the living room like I had finally lost my mind. Miranda blinked, startled. "Lee." That was a ceremonial print. You know, for press photos. A joke. A prop. The real check was deposited already. The funds are already locked in. Protected. You burned a souvenir. Her mouth parted slightly. "You're lying." "Nope." I walked over to the fireplace, looked at the ashes, then turned back to her with something close to pity in my chest. "You just committed arson over a prop." She blinked, the first crack in her armor showing. "No, I saw it in the drawer. It looked real. Because it's supposed to. You think they hand you a real check the size of a kitchen table?" What were you planning to do? March into a bank and demand a cash withdrawal from a giant piece of cardboard. Her hands twitched at her sides. You're trying to make me feel stupid. No, I said, quieter now. You did that all on your own. She looked at the ashes again, and I could see the flicker of doubt turn into panic. Her brain had caught up to the truth, and now she couldn't figure out how to undo it. She had made a play, one meant to scare me, rattle me, break me, and it had backfired in the most spectacular way. What else have you hidden? She asked, voice shaking now. You moved the money, didn't you? I nodded. Everything's legal. Everything's clean. You started making calls before we even had a conversation. I wasn't about to hand over our future to people who see me as a wallet with legs. Her expression hardened. You betrayed me. I tilted my head. I protected myself. There's a difference. And then she screamed, not words, not anger with purpose, just a primal, frustrated sound that filled the room and bounced off the walls. She picked up a picture frame from the shelf and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the tile near the kitchen. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching. She was unraveling now. All the control she thought she had, all the certainty. It was dissolving into ash, just like that fake check. And it wasn't the loss of the money that broke her. It was the fact that I had outmaneuvered her. I gave you everything, she gasped. No, I said evenly. You kept a scorecard. And when I won something, you didn't celebrate. You calculated. For a long moment, we just stood there in the smoke-filled stillness. The fire was dying in the hearth, the embers crumbling into gray dust. I could hear the wind outside, whispering against the windows like the world itself was watching. I turned to leave. Where are you going? To the workshop. You're just going to walk away? I already did, I said without turning back. I closed the door behind me and stepped into the cold. The sky was the color of steel, and the air bit at my skin. But out there, in that detached little space filled with wood shavings and oil and things I'd built with my own hands, I felt more human than I had in weeks. I pulled up the floorboards again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted the comfort of seeing it. The real proof. The quiet power of knowing I hadn't lost a thing. I sat down on the stool, let my hands rest on the workbench, and exhaled. Miranda's fire had scorched the air but not the future. And in her attempt to burn me, she'd lit the way forward instead. I expected silence after the fire. Maybe retreat. Maybe shame. What I didn't expect was the sound of fists slamming against my front door like a battering ram the very next evening. It was around 8 p.m. The workshop had become my refuge again, and I was sanding down a set of cedar shelves I'd been meaning to finish for weeks. The kind of project that made sense, that didn't argue back, that let me think without spiraling. I had headphones in, some old jazz humming low in the background, when I heard the first thump, then another, then a voice, loud, angry, unmistakable. Open the damn door, you ungrateful son of a... Marshall. I pulled the headphones off slowly and walked to the window. Through the blinds, I saw him on the porch, red in the face, neck veins bulging, his heavy hand cocked back to knock again. Behind him stood Doreen, her arms crossed and her mouth already moving before I even cracked the door. Miranda lingered behind them in the shadows, arms folded tight like she didn't want to be seen but refused to leave. I stepped into the doorway but didn't open it. Not fully, just enough to let the porch light hit my face and let them see I wasn't rattled. Evening, I said. Marshall's jaw clenched like it was the only thing keeping him from throwing the next punch. You think this is funny? You run off, hide money, lie to my daughter, and now you think you can lock everyone out. You're not locked out, I said calmly. You're just not invited in. That only made him angrier. He shoved the door open wider, but I had the chain on, so it clanked hard and held. I didn't flinch. I let him feel the resistance. Doreen leaned in then, her voice syrupy and sharp. We welcomed you into our family, gave you support, let you into our lives, and this is how you repay us? You think you would have ever gotten that lucky without Miranda? I raised an eyebrow. Did she buy the ticket? Don't be smart, she snapped. You were nobody before her. There it was. The truth beneath the pretense. They didn't just feel entitled. They believed they were responsible for the win. Like they'd written my numbers, drawn the balls, handed me the money. Marshall slammed a palm against the doorframe. We built you up. Without us, you'd still be broke. I let out a breath. Marshall, I'm not broke now. And thanks to your daughter, I'm not naive either. Doreen scoffed. So what, now you're cutting us off? After everything? I stared at her. Tell me what, exactly, you did to deserve a cent. Silence. You didn't pay a single bill in this house. You didn't help me through night shifts. You didn't sit with me while I studied contracts or saved every damn receipt just to stay afloat. You've guilted Miranda into believing she owes you the world, but I don't. I never did. Marshall puffed up, ready to shout again, but I lifted my phone. By the way, this has all been recorded. The moment you started banging on the door, I hit record. I figured something like this might happen. Miranda's head snapped up. You what? You heard me. I said. Your father threatening me. Your mother insulting me. It's all here. And I'm saving it. For my lawyer. For court. Maybe even for the world, if I have to. That was when Miranda stepped forward. For the first time that night, she looked unsure. Not angry, shaken. You're recording us? You burned a fake check in my living room, Miranda. After trying to funnel money through our savings account to your dad. You made this a war. I'm just documenting it. You're paranoid, she said. But her voice was too high, too brittle. No, I said evenly. I'm prepared. I saw the flicker in Marshall's eyes then, the realization that he couldn't bully his way out of this. He turned to Miranda, jerking his head. Let's go. We'll handle this another way. Doreen followed, mumbling something bitter under her breath. Miranda lingered for just a second longer, like she might try to soften it all, reach for some thread of forgiveness or nostalgia. But I didn't give her anything. She turned and left. I shut the door, locked it, slid the bolt. Then I turned off the porch light. And I smiled. Not because it was over. I knew it wasn't. Not even close. But because they'd just shown their hand, and I'd recorded every card they played. The rest of the night was still and strange. I listened to the playback once, then twice. Marshall's voice cracked through the speaker like a bad memory. Doreen's screechy entitlement. Miranda's silence. I didn't sleep much. But I wasn't restless. I was ready. The next day, I emailed the audio file to my lawyer. Just a backup, in case they tried something bigger. And I had a feeling they would. Because people like that? They don't take no as an answer. They take it as a challenge. I walked into Ms. Stanton's office with more than just a file folder. I carried the weight of every conversation, every threat, every lingering look Miranda had thrown across the table like a loaded weapon in the past week. The sleek office smelled like espresso and leather-bound consequences. Ms. Stanton greeted me with her usual calm presence, her dark blazer immaculate, hair pulled back so tightly it looked like stress itself couldn't ruffle her. She was the kind of woman who made you feel like your enemies already lost the moment you booked the appointment. Seated across from me was Mr. Gray, my newly retained attorney. He was older, slower with his words, but his mind was a vault, cold, strategic, and utterly unimpressed with theatrics. The kind of man who made his adversaries check their confidence twice before speaking. He listened as I laid out the most recent events, the door pounding, the threats, the fake check burning, and especially the part where Miranda had been siphoning money from our joint account to her father under the label business consulting. She transferred over $18,000 in 2 days, I said, sliding the bank printouts across the desk. Mr. Gray adjusted his glasses, scanned the document, and grunted. Sloppy. Not hidden well. That's good for us. Miss Stanton nodded. We've got what we need. Now we separate the winnings completely and remove any pathway she could take to access funds tied to the ticket. I already moved the funds to a private trust, I said. Is it safe enough? It's a start, Stanton replied. But we'll make it bulletproof. Mr. Gray slid a new folder across the desk to me. Asset shielding. We'll move the trust under an LLC registered out of state, one she can't trace or connect to without disclosure. Miranda's current activity with your joint accounts is enough to demonstrate financial misconduct. She's going to accuse me of hiding everything, I said. She's going to accuse you of a lot more, Stanton said without blinking. That's what people do when they realize the power they thought they had is gone. But let her scream. Screaming without evidence is just noise. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled. I felt like I'd been holding that breath for a week. So what happens next? You file, Mr. Gray said simply. Today. This afternoon. Petition for divorce, asset protection clause attached, immediate freeze on all marital financial accounts. You've given us enough to prove she acted in bad faith. The court won't take kindly to her transferring joint savings to her father. She's going to lose her mind. She already has, Ms. Stanton said quietly. You're just getting ahead of it. So I signed. The forms were clean, precise, final in a way that punched through my chest. It wasn't that I was mourning the relationship. God knows that part had been dying in whispers for a long time. It was that the last vestiges of doubt were now being buried under legal ink and initials. I wasn't turning back. There wasn't a version of this where she apologized and we rebuilt. Not anymore. The last thing Ms. Stanton handed me before I left was a thick envelope marked cease and desist. Inside, formal letters addressed to Marshall and Doreen, warning them that any further contact, threats, or coercive behavior would be grounds for a restraining order and potential criminal charges. I didn't enjoy having to go that route, but I wasn't going to sit still while they banged on my door like they owned the hinges. Back at the house, I stepped inside knowing things would never feel the same again. Miranda wasn't home. Her car was gone, the house quiet in a way that didn't soothe. It waited, like it knew a storm had been invited in and was still hiding in the basement. I walked into the master bedroom and opened the dresser drawer where we kept our shared savings checkbook and noticed immediately that the stack of slips was lighter. I checked the bank app. $0. She drained it completely. Every last cent. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. This wasn't panic spending. This was a move. She was making her stand, and she thought doing it quietly would leave me scrambling. But I wasn't scrambling. I took screenshots, printed statements, and emailed them straight to Ms. Stanton and Mr. Gray. When Miranda came home later that night, I was waiting at the dining table, a folder in front of me. She walked in wearing new boots and a coat I'd never seen before. I didn't ask how she paid for them. I already knew. Where were you? I asked. Running errands. Expensive ones, apparently. She rolled her eyes and dropped her purse on the kitchen counter. If this is about the joint account, I told you already, I'm just getting ahead of what's mine. You took everything. We're married, she said, pulling a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is also mine. Isn't that how it works? I opened the folder and slid a copy of the divorce filing across the table. Not anymore. She froze. For the first time in weeks, her expression faltered completely. She looked at the paper, then at me, and something flickered in her eyes. Rage, confusion, disbelief, maybe all three tangled up like a cord too tight to unravel. You're divorcing me? She whispered. You burned a fake check in our fireplace, stole thousands from our account, and tried to manipulate me into giving away half the winnings to people who never respected me. What exactly did you think was going to happen? She didn't answer. I stood slowly and picked up the envelope marked with her parents' names. Also, your folks will be receiving this by morning. They come near me again, and I'll file for a restraining order. You're insane, she breathed. No, I'm finished. I walked past her and headed for the door. I needed air, space, anything that didn't smell like perfume and entitlement. Where are you going now? She called after me. I turned briefly, hand on the doorknob. Somewhere I can breathe without looking over my shoulder. The door clicked shut behind me with the softest sound, but it echoed like thunder. It started with a status update. One of those carefully worded, passive-aggressive blurbs Miranda always favored when she wanted to stir drama without looking like the one holding the spoon. Funny how people change when money enters the room. Prayers up for those who forget who held them down. Broken heart #lessons learned. I saw it while standing in line at the bank. The teller was printing out updated documentation for my trust account. I read the post twice, shook my head, and turned off my phone. She wasn't wasting time. Barely 48 hours after being served, she'd begun rewriting the narrative. By the time I got home, it had escalated. Screenshots sent from mutual friends, old college classmates, even my neighbor Sophia, people I hadn't spoken to in months, started lighting up my phone. Bro, is it true what Miranda's saying? She said you stole the money? You froze her out? Man, she's posting like you cleaned her out and ran. Miranda had crafted a whole story, that she'd been blindsided, that I'd taken the winnings and ghosted her emotionally, that her own husband of 7 years had suddenly turned greedy and cruel. And in every carefully posed photo, she looked just distressed enough to earn sympathy. A few selfies with tear-stained cheeks. One cryptic clip in her car where she whispered about betrayal and selfishness. And, of course, subtle digs. I just hope he remembers the vows he made before the numbers hit. Sophia sent me a video that made me stop breathing for a second. It was Miranda standing in her mother's living room, trying to look fragile. All I asked was to share. That's what marriage is, right? He told me I was family, until he didn't need me anymore. I sat down, let the weight of it hit. Not because I believed it, hell no, but because I knew how fast lies traveled when painted with the right shade of heartbreak. Truth never gets the same head start as performance. I called Tyrell. He picked up on the second ring. I saw the posts, he said. Yeah, I replied. She's spinning it fast. She always was good at playing victim, he muttered. Want me to say something? No, not yet. Let her exhaust herself. But the next day, things tipped. Sophia, who'd always kept a quiet but observant presence in the neighborhood, walked over with something in her hand. She stood at the edge of my porch, waiting until I opened the door. I didn't want to get involved, she said, but after what I saw her post, I think you should have this. She handed me a flash drive. What is it? Footage from my front porch cam. It caught the night she burned the check. Caught her saying she did it because you wouldn't share. My breath caught. You still had this? Cloud backup, she said with a shrug. Didn't even think to look until people started whispering like you'd robbed her. I thanked her, sincerely, and promised to follow up. Once inside, I plugged in the drive and watched the grainy footage. It was angled perfectly, clear view of Miranda standing outside with the fake check in hand, lighter flicking, her voice unmistakable. If he won't share, he won't get a penny. I didn't smile. Not yet. But something settled in me, an anchor of truth that couldn't be edited or spun with hashtags. The following day, MS. Stanton took the footage and had it transcribed. Mr. Gray drafted a summary that would accompany it if we needed to present it in court. But I knew better than to wait for a courtroom. I sent an anonymous tip. A trusted local blogger known for exposing quiet scandals with receipts received an envelope in their inbox. Footage of Miranda's check-burning confession, screenshots of the bank transfers to her father labeled business consulting, and a copy of the cease and desist letter her parents had ignored. The post went live 2 days later. Headline, The Truth Behind the Lottery Wife. What Miranda Doesn't Want You to Know. It exploded. Comments poured in, some shocked, some smug, many angry. The footage played on loop. People compared her tears on social media with her voice in the video, calculating, cold. The bank transfer sealed it. The hypocrisy reeked. Tyrell texted, she's trending. Not the way she wanted. Miranda didn't post for 2 days. Then came her response. A longer video, eyes red, voice trembling. She didn't deny the footage. She pivoted instead. I made a mistake. I was overwhelmed. It's hard watching someone you built a life with change overnight. I never meant to hurt him. It was a soft apology cloaked in manipulation. A sympathy play. But the comments told a different story now. Girl, you burned a check and got caught. Medical fatigue? Please. Imagine asking for half and giving none of the credit. Her narrative had unraveled. Her credibility? Eviscerated. The fallout was swift. Mutual friends stopped replying to her. Her yoga studio quietly removed her from the monthly newsletter. Even her mother, Doreen, who had always lived for control, deactivated her Facebook after someone unearthed an old post boasting about Miranda's power of persuasion. When I stopped by the community center to drop off documents for a financial literacy workshop I'd been volunteering with, Sophia greeted me at the door with a small smile. She tried to twist it, she said softly, but truth's a patient thing. It waits. Then it wins. I nodded, exhaling for what felt like the first time in days. I didn't feel victorious. Not. Miranda had tried to turn greed into a public anthem, but the world had a funny way of hearing both sides when you gave it proof. And I had receipts. I arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that still had the tags on it 3 days before. Tyrell had made me buy it. You walk in that courtroom looking like the man who won, not the one trying to defend himself. It was crisp, unwrinkled, and, most importantly, it didn't smell like the sawdust and varnish that had clung to me for years. I didn't wear it for Miranda. I wore it because this time, no one was going to reduce me to the background of my own life. Miranda arrived 15 minutes late. She wore all white. Hair curled perfectly, eyes dusted with just enough shimmer to look fragile but composed. Her lawyer, a wiry man with a smirk stitched permanently across his lips, whispered to her as they walked in. She didn't look at me. Not once. Her gaze floated over everything like she was starring in her own version of events, one where she was the aggrieved wife, betrayed and discarded by the husband who got lucky and forgot her. We sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, separated not just by space, but by the chasm that had opened the moment she struck that match and burned the fake check. Her parents didn't come. That told me everything I needed to know. Either they were too embarrassed, or they had finally accepted that Miranda's ship was sinking and didn't want to be dragged down with it. Judge Halvorsen entered, stoic, efficient, unimpressed with dramatics. I liked her already. She didn't waste time on small talk. As she took her seat, the room settled into that taut silence that only government buildings know how to summon. My lawyer, Mr. Gray, stood up and walked her through everything with the calm, dispassionate voice of a surgeon before the first cut. He explained the origin of the lottery ticket, showed time-stamped photos of the ticket, the receipt, the trust paperwork, and the timeline of events that began from the moment the numbers hit. Ms. Stanton, seated behind us, handed over documentation of every transfer Miranda had made to her father's account labeled business consulting despite there being no actual business. And then came the footage, grainy but clear. Sophia's porch camera played across the courtroom monitor, showing Miranda standing on my front porch, lighter flicking, her voice cold and sharp. If he won't share, he won't get a penny. Her lawyer tried to object to its admission. The judge overruled it. He lives there. The camera's legal. Continue. Miranda shifted in her seat, folding her arms tighter, her pristine white blouse suddenly looking like a costume rather than a choice. Her lawyer rose, did his best to counter. He talked about emotional distress, about how Miranda had been shut out, misled, cut off from decisions she had every right to be a part of. He referenced the marriage, the years, the lifestyle built together. Then Miranda took the stand. I watched her place her hand on the Bible, swear to tell the truth, then sit in the witness chair like she was settling onto a stage. She spoke softly, carefully, her voice laced with just the right amount of tremble. I wasn't trying to be malicious, she said. I was scared. I thought he was going to leave me behind. And my parents, they've done so much for us. I panicked. The judge tilted her head. So your solution was to burn what you believed to be the winning check? Miranda hesitated. I thought it might make him see how serious I was. That it wasn't about money. It was about partnership. And the unauthorized transfers to your father? Miranda's voice dropped another octave. That was a misunderstanding. I didn't think he'd notice so soon. That earned a raised eyebrow from the judge. Then it was my turn to testify. Mr. Gray asked clear, simple questions. I stuck to the facts. When he asked me if I felt Miranda had tried to coerce me, I answered without bitterness. She saw the money as hers the moment I told her. She didn't ask if we were okay. She started spinning it in her head, dividing it among people who never helped us. And when I hesitated, she retaliated. That's not partnership. That's a hostile takeover. When her lawyer cross-examined me, he tried to paint me as cold, calculated, withholding. Isn't it true that you moved the money into a trust without consulting your wife? Yes. Why? Because I no longer trusted her. And yet you're still married at that point. And yet she was already making plans behind my back. The lawyer leaned in. So you're saying she was conspiring against you? I'm saying she was acting on her own agenda. I protected the money. She tried to steal it. He tried to rattle me after that, poking at the timeline, at my decision to sleep in the workshop, but the damage was already done. After both sides rested, the judge took a moment to review the material. The silence in the courtroom was crushing. Miranda didn't look up from her lap. She no longer wore the glow of a woman certain she'd win. She looked smaller now, like the blouse was too big and her defenses had all sunk into the floor. Then came the ruling. The court finds that the lottery winnings in question were procured by the respondent prior to any known financial contribution, communication, or involvement from the petitioner. Furthermore, the petitioner's actions in transferring funds without authorization, attempting to destroy what she believed to be the check, and involving third parties in coercive efforts demonstrate gross misconduct. The words hit the room like a cold slap. The petitioner's request for a 50% claim is denied. Furthermore, any remaining joint assets will be reviewed for equitable division, but the lottery winnings remain solely under the respondent's trust. Miranda's breath caught. Her lawyer patted her hand, but she pulled it away. She looked to the empty seat behind her, where her parents might have sat, and found only absence. The judge continued. This court will not reward manipulation. Marriage does not grant license to financial sabotage. The gavel dropped once. Sharp. Final. We stood. Miranda didn't. She stayed seated, blinking rapidly, lips trembling in a way that finally looked real. Her makeup had started to smudge. Her hair no longer perfect. As I walked past her, she whispered, "You really hate me now, don't you?" I paused but didn't sit. "No," I said. "I just finally stopped believing the version of you I wanted to see." I walked out of that courtroom into the sun, blinking hard against the sudden brightness. Tyrell was waiting by the steps, 2 coffees in hand. "How'd it go?" "She lost," I said simply. He handed me a cup and smiled. So, freedom tastes like overpriced coffee? I sipped. Freedom tastes like truth finally catching up. And it was worth every bitter drop. The money hit my private trust account on a Friday morning. No dramatic chime or notification. Just a silent number shift that marked the end of one war and the beginning of something cleaner. I stared at the balance for a long while, not with excitement, but with a quiet kind of relief, the kind that comes when you finally stop bracing for impact. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what it represented. Peace, autonomy, and a future I didn't have to negotiate with anyone who saw me as an obligation or an ATM. I didn't go on a spending spree. I didn't book a flight to Bora Bora or buy a sports car to flaunt in front of the neighbors. No, I bought something smaller, more personal. I bought the one thing I'd been dreaming about for years. A modest home about 30 minutes outside the city. It had a little wraparound porch, a garden that had been neglected but had good bones, and a detached garage that was already whispering ideas to my hands. I paid cash. No financing. No debt. No signatures required but mine. On move-in day, I brought only what mattered. My tools, my journals, some old photographs of my mom and dad, and the guitar I hadn't played in 5 years. Everything else had already been given away, donated, or discarded. I wanted no trace of the old life clinging to the walls. The first night in the new house was so quiet, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was unsettled, but because silence like that takes getting used to after chaos has lived in your ears for so long. No passive-aggressive clinking of plates. No overheard phone calls laced with entitlement. No sighs heavy enough to guilt me into second-guessing myself. Just the sound of my own breath, slow and real. I spent the first week fixing up the garden. There was something about digging into the dirt, pulling out weeds by the root, laying down fresh soil, and deciding what deserved to grow. I planted tomatoes, bell peppers, basil, and lavender. Not because I had some romantic dream of becoming a full-time gardener, but because I needed to prove to myself that new things could bloom where old things once died. I also restored my grandfather's truck, a battered 1981 Ford that had sat in Tyrell's garage for the past decade. The engine had good bones, just like the house. It took a couple weeks, a lot of parts ordered online, and more than a few skinned knuckles, but I got it running. When I drove it through the neighborhood for the first time, windows down and music up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, pride that had nothing to do with titles or approval. Just me, my hands, and something I'd made whole again. Around that time, Sophia reached out. She ran a small community center in the city, mostly youth programs, workshops, and local outreach. She said they were planning a new financial literacy series for teenagers and young adults, real-world skills nobody teaches in school. Budgeting, credit scores, understanding interest rates. She thought I might want to help. At first, I hesitated. Not because I didn't care, but because for so long I'd been invisible in every room that didn't need my labor or my patience. But Sophia saw something else. She'd seen how calm I stayed when Miranda's storm hit full force. She saw clarity, resilience. So I said yes. Every Saturday, I drove back into the city, stood in front of a room full of kids who had never touched a tax form, and told them about the day I bought a $2 ticket that changed everything. Not to glamorize it, not to make them chase luck, but to explain the trap of being unprepared when luck actually shows up. Winning money doesn't make you rich, I told them one afternoon, pacing with a marker in hand. It just shows you who around you is already poor in spirit. They wrote that down, and every time I locked up the center afterward, I felt lighter. I never sought revenge on Miranda. I didn't post online, didn't expose her further. The truth had done its job, and I didn't need to keep swinging. Last I heard, she moved into a one-bedroom condo not far from where we used to live. The yoga studio didn't renew her teaching schedule. Her parents had gone quiet. I think even she realized that trying to rebuild off a burned foundation just leaves you with soot in your mouth. She reached out once. A simple text, "Hope you're okay." I stared at it for 10 minutes before deleting it. Not out of hate, not out of anger, just because some doors don't need to be answered. Some chapters aren't meant to be reopened. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just need to be left alone to rot quietly under the weight of their own damage. Freedom wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks or some speech at a podium. It was quiet. It was a porch swing at sunset. It was the smell of rosemary in the garden, the creak of old floorboards under bare feet, the peace of knowing no one was scheming behind a shared bank login. It was driving into town, seeing Tyrell at the bar, clinking glasses and laughing about things that had nothing to do with money. "You really turned it around," he said one night, nursing his usual whiskey. I grinned. "Nah, I just finally stopped fighting to be understood by people who never listened." He nodded. "Still, you made it out clean." I looked around the bar, the room filled with strangers who had no idea what the last year of my life had cost me. "Not clean," I said, "but free. And freedom, real freedom, isn't cheap. But it's mine." A year later, Tyrell and I sat on my porch under a sky streaked with the last orange threads of summer. The air smelled like cut grass and grilled corn, and the distant hum of crickets replaced the chaos that used to fill my evenings. I held a cold beer in one hand, my boots kicked up on the porch railing, while Tyrell leaned back in a creaky wooden chair he'd helped me build. The house behind us glowed gently from the inside, simple, peaceful, mine. "She really thought that check was real," he said with a low laugh, shaking his head. "I mean, come on, man. Who burns a cardboard check and thinks the money vanishes?" I chuckled, sipping. "She didn't burn the money. She burned herself. That's poetic. You write that down yet?" "Maybe I'll save it for my memoirs," I replied, grinning. Chapter 12. How Not to Be Married to a Greedy Lunatic. We both laughed, the kind of laughter that lives deeper in the lungs, earned by survival, not circumstance. For a moment, we just sat in the quiet, letting the night settle around us. No yelling, no manipulation, no pressure to perform for anyone's approval. "I'll be honest," Tyrell said, glancing at me. "When you first told me about the win, I didn't think you'd keep your soul. Money like that? Most guys drown in it." I nodded. I almost did. For a minute, I thought I had to buy peace, buy loyalty, make everyone happy. And now I just water my garden, I said, tipping my bottle toward the small patch of tomatoes and herbs growing by the fence, and teach teenagers how to spot a bad loan before it eats their future. Tyrell looked over his shoulder at the house. "You did it right. Kept it simple. Protected your energy. That's the real fortune," I said quietly. He didn't respond immediately, but I could feel he understood. Because the truth is, $2.5 million changed my life, but not in the way people imagine. I didn't become someone new. I became someone I used to be before the exhaustion, before the bending, before I learned to shrink just to keep a marriage from exploding over small things like dignity or boundaries. In the beginning, I thought winning the lottery would fix what was broken. I thought maybe if the bills disappeared, so would the tension. If the debts were cleared, we'd smile more. But what money actually did was reveal the foundation beneath everything. And when the dust settled, I saw that our marriage was never about partnership. It was about image, control, and performance. Miranda hadn't loved me. She loved what I could provide. And the moment she saw a bigger provision, she reached for it, not to build with me, but to redistribute it to the people who taught her how to take without asking. The saddest part? I don't think she ever realized she was doing it. But I did. And now, I had something money couldn't buy. Peace that didn't need permission. Days filled with purpose, not obligation. Rooms that held laughter, not surveillance. Friendships built on truth, not transaction. I glanced at Tyrell. "Remember when we were in that one bedroom back in college, eating ramen and printing fake resumes just to get part-time jobs?" He laughed. "Hell yeah. You borrowed my only dress shirt for your interview and spilled orange soda on it." I smirked. "Still got the job, though. Because you talked your way through that whole stain. Said it was a design flaw you adapted to." "Which was true," I said, raising my brow. "Man, even then, you knew how to survive. I just didn't know how to choose myself back then." The truth of that lingered between us. Because survival is different from living. And for too long, I thought peace came from endurance. That if I just stayed calm, stayed steady, stayed useful, love would follow. But that's not how it works. Endurance doesn't inspire respect. It breeds expectation. You give enough without limits, and eventually, people stop seeing you as generous. They see you as a resource. That's what I was to Miranda. A resource. Now, I'm a man. Whole. Flawed. Self-owned. Later that night, after Tyrell left, I stood in my backyard under the stars, watering the lavender with one hand and sipping from a mug of tea in the other. The wind rustled gently through the fence line, and the cicadas sang like they had something sacred to say. I thought about the ticket again, not the money, but the moment. That random Tuesday, a gas station, a $2 whim. The universe had handed me a match, and for a while, I was afraid of the fire. But now, I understood it had always been a test. Not of luck, but of self. What would I protect? Who would I become when the door opened and I had a chance to walk through it? I didn't become rich because of the money. I became rich the moment I chose to walk away from anyone who couldn't see me beyond what I could give. A text pinged on my phone. Unknown number. Just wanted you to know I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. I hope you're well. M. I didn't reply. Not out of hate. Just detachment. Some chapters end with fire. Others end with silence. I looked out at the dark yard, at the small glow from the community center flyer I'd left on the porch for the weekend's event. And I smiled. Because the real fortune wasn't in my account. It was in my freedom. It was in my garden. It was in the version of myself I reclaimed, one quiet, defiant, unapologetic day at a time.